We all know Unrivaled sees it as a potential opportunity, which is still amazing that we have two co-founders as part of the Players Association as vice presidents. That's neither here nor there. We all know that's a conflict of interest. Now we have the sports media coming right out and saying it.
The professional women's basketball ecosystem is undergoing its most dramatic transformation in decades. What was once a relatively stable landscape dominated by a single major league is now a complex, competitive marketplace where multiple organizations are vying for talent, offering unprecedented compensation packages, and fundamentally reshaping what it means to be a professional women's basketball player. This shift represents not just an evolution, but a revolution, one that will have lasting implications for athletes, leagues, and the sport itself.
Today I did a video, former MVP, Angel McCautry, she come right out and said, you're going to have women that are like, why even play in the WNBA? If I can make that much more money, what are we doing? Why are we even putting because in a player like her situation where she was like a 6-time All-Star, she's probably getting $5, $6, $7, $8 million to play over there for one season. So, why risk it?
For over 25 years, the WNBA has stood as the premier destination for elite women's basketball players in the United States. While players have long supplemented their incomes by playing overseas during the offseason, the WNBA maintained its position as the sport's flagship league, offering legitimacy, visibility, and connection to American audiences that no other organization could match. That monopoly is now under siege from multiple directions. New domestic competitors and international leagues are not just nibbling at the edges of the WNBA's dominance. They're launching full-scale assaults on its business model, its talent pool, and its fundamental value proposition to players. The question is no longer whether the WNBA will face competition, but whether it can survive in its current form amid this new reality. Regardless of intent, the optics are problematic. When the people negotiating on behalf of players also run a competing business, it becomes difficult to separate genuine advocacy from self-interest. This structural complexity adds another layer to an already convoluted situation where multiple leagues, each with different business models and compensation structures, are competing for the same limited pool of elite talent.
Definitely going to disrupt the women's basketball ecosystem. It's just a matter of how much.
Okay, it is a threat. You heard it right there. It's going to be really interesting. This is going to turn out to be one of the more interesting stories.
While the domestic league has generated headlines and controversy, an even more significant disruptor is emerging from the international arena. A new global basketball initiative, operating internationally but attracting American talent, is preparing to launch with a compensation model that dwarfs anything currently available in women's and professional basketball industry sources. Suggests this international league is prepared to offer top-tier WNBA players' salaries that could reach 9 times their current earnings. To put this in perspective, elite WNBA players currently max out around $250,000 per season. Under the proposed international model, those same players could command salaries between $5 and $8 million for a single season. This isn't incremental improvement. It's a complete reimagining of what professional women's basketball players can earn. Former WNBA MVPs have publicly stated that such massive financial differentials will inevitably force players to reconsider their priorities. When the gap between domestic and international compensation reaches this magnitude, loyalty to tradition and league history can only stretch so far. The numbers are staggering across the roster, not just at the top. Reports indicate that even bench players in this international league could earn $2 million, far more than most WNBA starters currently make for a 6-time All-Star. The financial calculus is stark. Stay in the WNBA for $250,000, or play internationally for potentially $8 million. That's not just a raise, it's generational wealth in a single contract.
Women's Professional Basketball League set to launch in November of 2026. Project B players will receive an undisclosed salary plus an equity stake in the league. Project B league officials have stated that 66 people will earn higher salaries than those currently offered in the WNBA, with a potential WNBA lockout. You have a great column out there on the ambitious plan of Project B. What's it mean for the W, though, Jay?
It means a threat. It means a real serious threat, because the WNBA has spent so many years, so many decades now as kind of the only game in town in terms of professional basketball in the United States, that they were vulnerable. They were vulnerable to what the tech industry would call disruption.
The timing of these competing leagues creates additional complications that go beyond simple player choice. Both the Domestic Alternative League and the International Initiative are targeting the same calendar window, the period following the WNBA season through the start of training camp. This is precisely the off-season slot that players have traditionally used for overseas player rest. The domestic league operates on a 10-week season during this window, and reportedly includes exclusivity clauses in its contracts requiring players to commit solely to that league during its operational period. But what happens when the International League offers 3 times the compensation with potentially different contract terms?
League to compete against the NBA, probably also impossible. But if I want to create a new league for women to play basketball in and take down the W, I could make the argument that all I have to do is offer a wild amount of money to, 10 players, and then get everybody else to come in. What prevents somebody from just coming in and saying, fine, I'll give Caitlin Clark $250 million up front, and I'll build a whole league around her with these 10 stars, and nobody's going to need the W.
Man, I'm in with you. If we could find somebody to give us $250 million, we should do that ourselves and start a third one.
Evidence suggests these exclusivity provisions may not be as binding as initially believed. At least one prominent player who committed to the domestic league has subsequently also committed to the international league, indicating that either the exclusivity clauses contain loopholes, apply only to the playing season itself, or were never as comprehensive as reported. This creates confusion for players trying to navigate their options and uncertainty for leagues trying to secure talent. The overlap also creates practical challenges. If both leagues operate simultaneously during the off-season window, players must choose between them, unless they attempt to split time between organizations, which seems logistically improbable given the demands of professional basketball. This scheduling conflict transforms the competition from theoretical to immediate and concrete.
Venues. The NBA doesn't let you do that. The PGA Tour doesn't let you do that, but the WNBA does. And as we've seen, many players will go overseas to make money outside of the regular WNBA season. Now,
okay, I'm going to stop it right there, but that's going to be a very interesting piece of the CBA.
Perhaps the most telling indicator of shifting market dynamics is the pattern of player participation, or more accurately, non-participation. In the domestic league's second season, the league launched with considerable fanfare and attracted several high-profile players in its inaugural year. But as it prepares for year 2, notable absences are mounting. A major star from the first season has announced she will not return. A co-founder of the league, who also played in the first season, is not coming back. The league's most marketable new rookie from year 1 is sitting out. A veteran superstar who initially declined to participate remains uncommitted. A top college prospect has chosen not to join. These 5 incredibly popular players, each capable of drawing fans and media attention, are all opting out of the domestic league's second season. Their collective absence represents a significant blow to the league's visibility and credibility. More importantly, their availability on the open market creates opportunities for the International League to secure exactly the kind of star power it needs to establish legitimacy. The reasons for these decisions vary by individual circumstance, but the pattern is unmistakable. Top players are reassessing their options as the competitive landscape evolves. Some may be prioritizing rest, others exploring international opportunities, and still others simply concluding that the domestic league doesn't align with their career objectives. Whatever the specific motivations, the exodus suggests that competing leagues cannot take player participation for granted. The International Initiative is not simply offering higher salaries, it's proposing an entirely different model for professional women's basketball. The league plans to launch in November 2026 with a compensation structure that includes both substantial salaries and equity stakes in the league itself. Offering players ownership stakes represents a sophisticated approach to talent acquisition. Rather than just paying higher wages, the league is inviting players to become stakeholders in the organization's success. This creates aligned incentives. When the league grows in value, players benefit directly beyond their salaries. It's a model borrowed from startup culture and represents a more modern approach to talent retention than traditional sports contracts. League projections indicate that 66 players will earn more than current WNBA maximum salaries. This isn't just about landing a handful of superstars. It's about creating a competitive salary structure throughout the roster that systematically outpays the established league, When 2/3 of your roster earns more than the best players in the competing league, you've fundamentally reset market expectations. The international positioning also matters strategically. By branding as a global league rather than an American competitor, the organization sidesteps some of the patriotic or cultural loyalty that might favor the WNBA. For players already accustomed to playing overseas, this simply formalizes existing patterns while dramatically increasing compensation and adding equity upside. This represents the first truly viable large-scale challenge to the WNBA's dominance. Previous attempts to create alternative women's basketball leagues have failed due to insufficient funding, inability to attract top talent, or unsustainable business models. This initiative appears to have solved at least the first two challenges, leaving only long-term sustainability as an open question. The emergence of credible competition in women's basketball highlights a fundamental difference between women's and men's professional sports infrastructure. Creating a rival to the NBA or NFL is essentially impossible. The capital requirements, infrastructure needs, and talent depth make such ventures unrealistic. The NBA employs 450 players across 30 teams, supported by decades of infrastructure investment, billion-dollar media deals, and cultural entrenchment that no startup could replicate. The NFL is even more entrenched, with enormous player rosters, massive stadiums, and a cultural significance that approaches civic religion in many American cities. Women's basketball operates at a different scale. The WNBA employs approximately 144 players across 12 teams. The talent pool, while deep, is concentrated enough that a well-funded competitor can achieve credibility by securing just 10 to 15 star players. With enough financial backing, a rival league can assemble a roster that compares favorably to the WNBA in terms of name recognition and competitive quality. This vulnerability stems not from any inherent weakness in women's basketball, but from the WNBA's smaller operational scale. When the entire league employs fewer than 150 players, capturing even a fraction of that talent pool creates viable competition. The math simply works differently than it does in men's sports. Technology industry observers would recognize this as classic disruption, an established player with legacy infrastructure being challenged by nimbler competitors unburdened by historical constraints. The WNBA's decades of history, its relationships with NBA teams and arenas, and its ESPN broadcasting deal are strengths. But they also represent commitments and structures that limit flexibility. New leagues can design compensation models, scheduling, and business operations from scratch, unconstrained by existing agreements or historical precedent. All of these competitive pressures are converging on one critical event: the negotiation of a new collective bargaining agreement between the WNBA and its players. The current CBA expires after the 2027 season, meaning negotiations are happening right now, and the presence of competing leagues gives players unprecedented leverage. The WNBA faces a fundamental strategic dilemma. The NBA prohibits its players from competing in other leagues during its season, an exclusivity arrangement that protects the league's brand and ensures stars aren't dividing their time and energy. The WNBA has traditionally taken a different approach, allowing and even expecting players to compete overseas during the offseason to supplement their income. This arrangement reflected economic reality. WNBA salaries weren't sufficient for most players to live comfortably year-round, so overseas play became a necessity. The league tacitly acknowledged that it couldn't match international compensation, and accepted that players would spend half the year playing elsewhere. Now, the WNBA is reportedly seeking to change this dynamic. League management wants to insert language into the new CBA that would prevent players from competing in domestic rival leagues. The concern is straightforward. If star players spend their off-seasons playing for competing American leagues, it dilutes the WNBA brand and makes it harder to position itself as the premier destination for women's basketball. But players are acutely aware of the financial opportunities these rival leagues represent. Being told they cannot pursue life-changing compensation to protect the WNBA's competitive position is a difficult sell, particularly when players can argue that the WNBA's historical underpayment created this vulnerability in the first place. If the WNBA insists on exclusivity without offering compensation that approaches rival leagues, players may refuse to accept the CBA terms. That refusal could lead to a work stoppage, either a strike by players or a lockout by ownership. Neither scenario is desirable, but both are increasingly plausible as the gap between what players can earn elsewhere and what the WNBA offers continues to widen. The WNBA wants to protect its market position and prevent talent from fragmenting across multiple leagues. Players want maximum compensation and freedom to pursue the best opportunities. The domestic league wants to secure talent commitments without being priced out by international competitors. The international league wants to establish credibility by landing star players and doesn't necessarily need long-term commitments, just enough participation to launch successfully. The International League's strategy is particularly clever in this context. It doesn't need to sign every player, just enough stars to establish legitimacy and generate fan interest. If 15 to 20 marquee names commit, the league can fill out rosters with less prominent players and still create a compelling product. This focused approach means the International League can offer astronomical salaries to a select group, rather than trying to match the WNBA's broader roster needs.